Welcome into Basketball by Association. My name is Arky. Shea, that is Joel C. Cortez. Joel, as we predicted to start the season, the Denver Nuggets in 5 over the Miami Heat in one of the boringest seasons in NBA history. Joel, I don't know if we need to talk about anything. We just predicted it all. We predicted last year the Remember Us tour by the Warriors, and this year we predicted the Denver Nuggets to be able to get that championship finally.
Let's be real. When we go back, did you predict that? Because I didn't. I did not predict a Nuggets championship.
Listen,
I think we were both in agreement that they were fully capable of getting there, but I honestly don't remember. I think I had Bucks Clippers in the finals, and I said Giannis getting another one.
That's not sort of what is probably in the archives. I know people can go find out in the archives. I mean, it's free to go listen wherever you get your podcast or check it out on the old YouTubers. But I think that's exactly what we predicted. Nuggets 5, Heat. I get it.
We predicted the Heat would be the 8th seed.
Yeah. Well, I said 7. So
run the table of our sanity.
Yeah, I thought that they would win, that they would be the 7th seed coming out of the play-in. But that's my thought, right? That's just what I had. I think you had the 8th seed, so you probably nailed that better.
All right. Well, since you're such a Nostradamus about this stuff,
it's about to blow up in my face fast.
Let's see if you can guess who we're naming this episode after. Which, by the way, we are going to talk Nuggets. We'll probably talk Bradley Beal free agency. There's been some other movement. We're now into silly season where we're prior to the draft and free agency and all that stuff. Lots of fun. But this is kind of special, Arky. This is episode 150 of Basketball by Association, Mark II. This is the second iteration of this show. About 150 episodes in its current version, its current format. You and I have been together for, I think, all of them, if not like 95% of them. So it's cool. And there's only one player in NBA history, oddly enough, who has logged 150 career playoff games. And you're going to have a hard time guessing this person at first. Because playing career, they're a 5-time NBA champ. This gentleman is 5-time NBA champ. That should narrow down the list significantly.
Okay.
The problem is, said person doesn't have any other career accolades as a player.
Okay.
They came into the league, were drafted by the Chicago Zephyrs. No, not the Chicago Bulls, not the Chicago Stags, the Chicago Zephyrs in 1962-63. This gentleman then logged 2 seasons with the Los Angeles Lakers during, I think, their first years out in LA, and then did 11 seasons with the Boston Celtics, which is where he got a handful of rings, then became one of the most decorated coaches in NBA history, but no ring. No ring as an NBA coach, despite the fact he is one of the innovators of what I guess we would all consider the modern NBA game.
Oh,
and
okay.
He has coached a couple of iconic teams. Even though they didn't get their ring, they are forever immortalized, I think, in NBA lore. Oddly enough, 2 of them were stints in the same place, a franchise that did go on to get a handful of rings after this guy was no longer coach.
I think I got this one.
Let's do it.
I think, because we're talking the Zephyrs, so we're talking... Was it early 60s, like 61?
62, 63, yeah.
Okay, so 62, 63. No accolades there, some championships. Innovator of the game in coaching. That is, I think, what got me here. Because I was trying to think who innovate coaching.
He is a Hall of Famer, and a bunch of people have been playing catch up to this guy for a long time.
So is this Don Nelson?
It's the Don Nelson episode. Yeah,
I love Don Nelson, man. I love Don Nelson. I love the Chicago Zephyrs sort of background story that has.
I did not know that about him until I knew he's one of those rare guys who had been a Laker and a Celtic.
Yeah,
including during the rivalry era. Like, that's really crazy. But yeah, I did not know the thing about the Zephyrs, so we learned something.
Have you seen sort of the recent stories done on with Don Nelson?
Just little bits. I know he's living the high life, metaphorically and literally speaking, out in Hawaii, where he loves to golf and partake in cannabis. My favorite Don Nelson story, I did get a chance to interview him a couple of times when he was in his second stint with the Warriors. It was post We Believe.
Okay.
Or was it right around that time? It's right during that era. I can't remember if it's that exact season, but Don Nelson had a long-running tradition that he would come out to the post-game press conference and would always have a beer in his hand. Always had a can, and it was always cheap beer. I mean, it was Bud Light, it was whatever, like it was cheap beer, and that's what he would have as his little post-game celebration, win or lose. And he would sit there and just chill with the reporters. And that always struck me as there was such a dichotomy between that and like the overwhelming intensity of like a Pat Riley who would chew your butt off even just in the post-game scrum if you asked the wrong question, or, Jerry Sloan, it was hard to tell if he had a pulse most of the time. And Popovich does his thing, of course. There were great coaches and talkative coaches, and Don Nelson wasn't always like the most talkative. There were times where it was obvious he just wanted to get out of there, but this was a guy who had clearly been around the league for so long and had done so much that he could show up to a press conference drinking a beer and nobody would bat an eye.
He's got this sort of Godfather status, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like with NBA players, personnel. And he still sort of has that connective tissue with sort of today's player too.
Mm-hmm.
And also doesn't hurt the fact that he's very much pro cannabis. So that's not the worst thing in the world as far as having that cool factor when it comes to the current NBA players.
He's got some street cred, and his players mostly, there's a few stories against it, but mostly really liked playing for him because of the freedom he gave and really dialing into the artistic side of the NBA, that free-flowing, make it up as you go. Yeah, we're going to have structure, but another one of those guys like a Mike D'Antoni, who is a huge Don Nelson disciple, who just looked at the game and said, what? I'm going to do things absolutely differently. I'm going to do things opposite of what everyone else is doing. And again, people will throw the knock that neither of those guys have a ring, but you know what? The game is better for it. And those Warriors rings, they don't happen without Don Nelson, and they don't happen without Mike D'Antoni kind of paving the way for this style of much more fun basketball, which is a great tie-in to our NBA Finals, by the way.
Well, let's talk about these NBA Finals. The final of these series is complete. And Joel, it would not be indicative of what I think a lot of this series has been if it wasn't done in the most Miami Heat Denver Nuggets way that it could have happened, where Miami has had multiple first halves and multiple opportunities where it looks like that they were going to have a shot at this upper hand, maybe bring this thing back to Miami kind of thing, and no, that's just not the case. A stupendous second half and a rock fight, by the way, too, between these two in that entire game.
Yeah.
Good old fashioned. We always like to talk about it, the games that the old NBA fans thought they really liked. This was one of those.
You got it, friends.
You got it in Game 5, and Denver just they proved their mettle. They proved their depth. And there's a lot that can be said about this series in terms of how Nikola Jokic played and Jamal Murray and how they played on their side. And just as well for Miami as far as the disappearance from some players in this series, especially comparative to the Boston series. But this was, as we sort of thought going into it, we were saying this when it was 3-1 or 3-2 Miami over Boston, that whoever wins that series, we still like Denver. And you sort of see why. And Denver played like the team they were and not the legacy that they've had.
Their legacy prior to this playoffs was a very talented team that could win regular season games and was questionable at best in the playoffs, right? They had run into some teams like the Warriors and like the Lakers, especially over the last couple of years, where they couldn't get it done, but they looked overmatched, not only physically, but mentally. And yeah, there was injuries, especially against the Warriors. Playing into that, we know Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. have been hurt for a long time. But there was still that question mark. Is Nikola Jokic a stat patter? Is he a regular season type of guy? Can he be the number one on a championship team? And are the Nuggets ready? Their roster looks ready and they're healthy, but are they truly ready to get into some of these street fight type of series with experienced champion players who are leading those type of teams? And we saw our first inkling that they were going to be able to answer the bell against the Phoenix Suns. Those were some really tough games in there. And Phoenix has a couple of guys in Chris Paul who, no, not a champion, but has been around the block enough times, and Kevin Durant, that could lead a team like that, which was very talented. And Denver rose to it. They showed a mental toughness that even when games got tight, Phoenix had their moments, and I think it was a 6-game series, but Denver came back on a lot or hung with it. Very, very tough. And then the next hurdle was going to be the Lakers, a team that we thought might have their number, that this was a really bad matchup for Denver. And the Nuggets really not only took punch after punch, but were landing just as many as they took. And it was really eye-opening, the toughness that Denver played against a very physical, very, tight Lakers team defensively. And Denver was able to give as good as they got and to get out of that series. So by the time that Denver gets to Miami, gets to that series, which, I guess was at home, there was the mystique of the Miami Heat for sure. Miami had done something that nobody really had been able to do. And in a way, it's because they have the extra step that the 99 Knicks didn't have, which with the play-in, there was even a little bit more mystique about it. And some of that may be recency bias. They were both incredible runs. But Miami had this, and Miami had taken out a lot of top seeds along the way. But you and I both said, we think Denver, as long as they're prepared to be in that type of a street fight, Denver can do this. And that's what the Nuggets showed us. Despite the Game 2 loss, which was it could have been a confidence shaker, a backbreaker, Denver bounced back. Denver, I think, understood after that Game 2 that no, it's not just a street fight parts of every game or certain games. It's going to be like this the whole way. And when they rolled up their sleeves and, like you said, got into that rock fight, they showed that they could play that way. And it wasn't pretty, and Denver shot an atrocious percentage from downtown, especially comparatively to what they had done throughout the regular season and even through the playoffs. And they still were able to get into that type of game, defend their butts off, and then move it enough and find guys. And Jamal Murray hitting tough shots, even when he didn't shoot great percentages. And Jokic, even though he was the focal point of every defense that was out there, being able to still basically do what he needed to do. And the Nuggets overcame really an atrocious series from Michael Porter Jr., except for Game 1 and Game 5, where he was passable, at least. He was passable. Aaron Gordon was kind of hit or miss. He gave him a couple of really big games. He had 4 points in Game 5 in the closeout, and yet +8 because he continued to play good defense. Bruce Brown, Christian Brown, Jeff Green to a lesser extent, all gave them exactly what they needed. Even DeAndre Jordan, who shouldn't be in the league at this point. But DeAndre Jordan, he is a good locker room guy. And by all accounts, he's a guy who knows every play in the playbook from both teams. I've heard this story now a couple of times, and you wouldn't think that about DeAndre Jordan. He didn't have that kind of aura about him when he was with the Clippers, but people talk about how he is always 110% dialed into the scouting reports and is calling out the other team's plays before they even run it. So he's a good guy to have around. But kudos to DeAndre Jordan for coming in 3 minutes where Jokic was hurt, or not hurt, where he was in foul trouble. And the Nuggets had tried putting Jeff Green on Bam Adebayo, and he was getting cooked. And the Heat were starting to pull away with it. So you turned to DeAndre Jordan, and 3 minutes may not seem like a lot, but in those 3 minutes where he was -2, didn't score, didn't get a rebound, but he did have a block shot, and it was a big one. And he also helped anchor the defense just enough that they stopped the bleeding and kind of got reset before the first half ended. It's little things like that that can make a difference in a 5-point game. And that game felt like it was straight out of the 90s. The score looked like it was straight out of the 90s. For anybody who's sitting here complaining, going, oh, it was a really ugly game, and they couldn't hit a shot, and there was just so many fouls. Guys, that's what games were like in the 90s. So you can't have it both ways. If you're asking to go back when it's a tougher, more hard-nosed league and they don't really like each other, fine. But the game gets uglier by doing that. I'm not saying you can't have games like that, but the modern NBA where they hit a lot more shots and there's a lot more possessions, like it's got something nice about it too. So let's not try to play both sides here.
And you've got a little bit of everything in the series, to be honest with you.
You did.
You got the Miami Heat drag fighting that game in making Denver earn the championship for that final game. And they did it for the most part the entirety of the series. You know, there were lapses in quarters and such that happened. And also Denver just being supremely better as far as top to bottom talent and the depth,
bigger,
the depth
stronger,
mainly.
more talented.
The depth mainly. Also, the more even distribution outside of your number one. Your number two showed up more often. Your number three showed up at least a little bit in this series. And outside of Jimmy Butler, who did not have a great game in Game 5. I think he's like 5 of 19 or something from the field in that game. Bam Adebayo had some great games in this series, but you had some just quiet to just non-existent nights from guys that have to step up if you're Miami to be able to overcome this kind of a talent disparity. Like Kyle Lowry, like he's a dude that can score for you. And granted, he got like 12 points, and that's not crazy bad.
9 boards, 4 assists, a couple of steals.
It's not a terrible game, but like he didn't have a great series overall.
Right.
Caleb Martin, I think finally got the double digits in Game 5.
He fell back down to earth hard, didn't he?
Huge hard. And that's, you gotta think that's one of the big reasons why Miami was able to sort of overcome Boston in those 7 games in the Eastern Finals. Gabe Vincent, had sort of been coming back from an injury the last several games. And then again, say what you want about it as much as you want about it. You didn't get Tyler Herro. Right. And you were just the whole postseason, and they knew it. They knew about this. But as far as trying to go gun for gun with what Denver had, the ammo was just lesser. And Eric Spoelstra can only coach so much, and he coached his butt off in this series, to be frank, to give them a shot.
And the Heat played their butts off defensively. Yeah. They played them off. Yeah.
There was never a time in this series where I thought Miami was just completely toast from an effort standpoint, right? They this was just the grind that they've been used to doing for years with that franchise, and Denver just happened to get the W there. Let me ask you this about Denver, if you don't mind. Do you take any shine off of Denver, considering that their path was an 8, a 4, a 7, and an 8 seed to win this championship?
No, because if it was that easy, the Bucks would have won the championship, right? Or been in the NBA Finals. And the Celtics, as the 2 seed, would have been in the NBA Finals. And, you can play that game. The Nuggets beat the hottest team in the West in the Los Angeles Lakers in order to get to the NBA Finals. So, and those Lakers had to take down a Warriors team that was the defending champs. It was not an easy road. It was a weird year out of parity. The standings didn't mean a whole lot this year. There wasn't a lot of breathing room. I mean, we said it, even a 1 seed to an 8 seed, and the 8 seed barely even got in the Miami Heat. They were separated by 9 games. Right. Like that's insane that the champs win 53 games. So it's a weird year, but I don't think it takes anything away from Denver other than to say, like, man, this is the first time in a long time that a non-60 win team is going to hoist the trophy. And they didn't even get close to 60 wins. But look around the rest of the league. There was nobody with 60 wins this year. It's been a long time since that has happened. And there was a lot of really good, solid teams, solid basketball. There was a lot of injuries along the way, but there always is. And I don't want to hear anything about Denver being just the only healthy team, because Denver wasn't the only healthy team over the last couple of years. So you play that game, maybe this is Denver's second championship. If, you cannot have it both ways. So no shine taken off at all. And Denver proved against a team that was fighting their butts off in Miami and they had slain a lot of giants. Denver came in and gave it as good as they got, and played a really veteran type of series.
Right. This wasn't like an Atlanta or Chicago 8 seed. They beat a hard-nosed, gritty team that's become known for this, who also went through a bunch of higher seeds on their way to that.
Who
So I
was
think
the number one seed in the East last year? Miami was the
Yeah.
number one Eastern seed, and they were in the finals just a couple years ago when
And it's
Denver
not like they had a
couldn't
huge
make
talent.
it to the finals.
Exactly. It's not like they had a huge talent drop off from last year to this year for Miami either. So that wasn't sort of the big. I also take away. I don't take the shine away because the efficiency of which Denver ran through this postseason, right, was really, really clean and like just underappreciated. I think the hottest team in the West by the time they got to them was the Lakers, and they dispatched them in 4 games. Now, that's not easy to do when you have a team that's vying for the shot to go to the NBA Finals, and to be able to do so, and to be able to come back from double digits on the road against a team like that.
And 2 healthy relatively healthy first ballot Hall of Famers, and a team that was just on fire about as much as anybody in the league through the second half of the season.
Yeah, and the way that they were able to beat Phoenix, super impressive in the series before, and then to go through 5 for the NBA championship. And even though they had a couple of opportunities in this series to sort of have one drop out of their hands, so to speak, they didn't. They didn't. So they proved not only their depth, but also their talent and their grittiness, that they were a tougher team than I think a lot of people probably sort of ascribe to what they've known for the Denver Nuggets. And I think there's a lot of people who still think Carmelo Nuggets, who still think of D'Antoni Nuggets, and they don't sort of see what the Mike Malone Nuggets have become.
The everything that you just said about what they did as a team and that efficiency being underappreciated, then I think, and he's getting a lot of laurels right now, but you got to tie that into Nikola Jokic's performance. Not only did they play that efficiently through the playoffs and just very workman-like dispatch of every opponent that came up, and never really left any doubt about it. Even the world-beating Minnesota Timberwolves in the first round.
You see what karl-anthony Towns is saying out loud?
Yeah. I mean, they took care of that business in every round, and Jokic put together statistically the greatest postseason ever. Nobody's going to give that to him. I mean, a lot of people are going to put all sorts of caveats and hedges, but statistically, it's the greatest postseason trip ever. And his team was really, really good as he did it. Like there's no doubt at this point that you can make the case. All right, he didn't get the 3rd MVP. He should have, whatever. We know there's politics, but you can no longer make any case that the previous 2 MVPs were hollow in any way. Like get that off the table. Those were legit. This guy is legit. And I think everybody's starting to, at least out of the side of their mouth, starting to acknowledge that.
This is an all-time guy. This is an all-time guy playing right now. And I hope more and more people get a chance to sort of appreciate him while they can, because everyone falls in love with the superstar names that are flashy. LeBron, Giannis, Ja, all the guys who rightfully so should be given their flowers for being
absolutely. They deserve all that.
But
Embiid
Jokic
deserves all of it.
Quietly
deserves all of it.
He's quietly forgetting his MVP trophy wherever he's at and not wanting to do the parade, which is, I guess, scheduled for today as we're recording. Did you hear him in the post-game press conference when they were asking him if he was excited to go to the parade? And he was like, well, when's the parade? And he was like, Thursday. And he's like, no.
Yeah, he wanted to go home.
I want to go home.
He said that right away. It's like, the job is done. I'm ready to go home. And there's the articles floating around his passion, the thing he truly is passionate about is horse racing. And he was into that well before he was into basketball. And his dad finally had to sit him down and said, become a great basketball player first, and you can be a great, a great horseman after that. Which thankfully he took that to heart.
What could we be dealing with if basketball was his sole focus? Like if that's all he thought about every day and not horses, like there's nothing else inside his brain trying to get him to think about something else, that he's sort of distracted at all by horses. Could we be looking at the greatest player ever.
No. But
You say that,
I
but like
say
we're also
that.
talking
I
about a
say
guy who's
that.
deserving of the last 3 MVPs and gotten 2 of them,
Yeah.
and just led the entire postseason in points, rebounds, and assists as a center.
Would he potentially come in better shape? Yeah, but work ethic wise, I think this is a guy, and we can probably learn something from it too. Like, this is a guy, by all accounts, when he's there, when he's working, it's 110%. You know, it's a guy who's dialed in on the film study, dialed in on the workouts. You don't see Jokic dogging it. I mean, he's slow, he's got a piano on his back, but you still see him hustling to get down the court. And that keeps improving year over year as his fitness improves. So I think if there was more like being dialed into it, could you see a rip Nikola Jokic? Yeah, absolutely. But I do think it's a guy that when the job is done and when it is break time, he has that separation and that ability to walk away versus other guys who, yeah, we give them plaudits for basketball being the only thing and dialed in, and they're so maniacal about that. And that works for some guys, other guys it doesn't. And there are certain people with that work-life balance who really struggle after they're done if they don't have something else that grabs that attention in a way. They struggle to be able to walk away from the game because they literally have nothing else to their identity. So I don't think there's one right way or wrong way to do this. I think it's a little disingenuous, and we did this with Steph Curry. I remember you and I having this exact conversation around Steph Curry, where they're so good, they're at the height of their powers, and we are left to sometimes ask that question to go, yeah, but what if they just did a little bit more? What if Steph Curry was just a little bit stronger, or didn't have the injuries, or and we did that with him, was a better defender, and Jokic has improved as a defender. His body has improved. His game continues to improve. He's won the last 2 MVPs, as you said. So I don't know realistically what more anyone else should be asking of him, other than continue to give your absolute best when you show up, and that hasn't been an issue. You want to race horses after that? You want to do that thing? Is that better than my off-season activity is sitting in the strip club? Like, it's not for me to judge, but I think everybody's got their different things. Some guys race cars, some guys buy cars or into real estate or into their businesses, or some guys are young yet and they just kind of sit around and they party. And I think there's a time and a place for that too. But everybody's got their thing. There's a few out there who, as soon as the season is done, are locked in the gym and that's all they do. More power to you. But I think it's okay. I think it's okay to have that separation of church and state a little bit here.
Well, what I'm hearing is Joel C. Cordes' church is a strip club in the postseason. I get it. That's fair enough.
I ride my horse to get there.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do, Joel Cordes. Okay, so let's talk about Jokic a little bit more specifically in the series itself. And in the closeout game, I think even more specifically want to get in there. Another fantastic effort from him and another great game. Distributing did well, scoring well, rebounding the ball, which was huge. They needed every second chance opportunity they could in that game. And what was, I think, a 7 or 8 point halftime lead was basically gone in the third quarter. And the fourth quarter, Miami was just 18 points in that fourth quarter.
Jokic also, I think, played the best 5 consecutive games of defense in his entire career.
Well, that's where I was getting to with Jokic, so you could sort of talk about him. And a big reason for that had to be Jokic's play. Defensively, he was very good in this series and very good in Game 5.
He got some pokeaways that were not credited as steals to him. He's only listed as 1 block. But you saw over and over Jokic rotating properly, walling people up, coming over as the help defender, making life tough on Bam Adebayo, whereas the first 2 games, Bam did kind of get whatever he wanted, even though he couldn't stop Jokic on the other end. Bam was getting to his spots at those elbow jumpers and that fadeaway, kind of the Dirk shot that Jokic had no answer to. But Jokic continued to improve throughout that series, and anytime that Bam tried to take Jokic in the post, it was nothing doing. There was nothing good happening out of that. And when Jokic started to come over as the help defender on Jimmy Butler, and he wasn't the only one. Porter Jr. did a great job on this. Pope did a good job. Basically, any of the Nuggets did a great job coming down as the double onto Jimmy Butler or the switch. Even Jamal Murray had some great sequences, and we don't think of Murray as a strong defensive guy, but Murray played some of the best defense of his career in this series as well because they needed to. But Jokic was a complete player. Was he an elite defender? No, absolutely not. But was he more than passable and even a plus guy in most of the situations? Yeah, he was. And it made me think back to like those Cleveland Cavalier teams going into it where like, you know what? Kyrie and Kevin Love, they just need to be neutral and give you plus defense sometimes. And that's going to be good enough. What they can't be is minus guys. And that's been a shift from Jokic too, where he's been too slow and they had to build the entire defense around kind of covering for him to then being able to live within that role and being able to do well enough with it. And now all of a sudden you've seen a progression where it's like, oh no, he can be a positive on that end. Maybe not every possession, but he's so elite on the offensive end. If you're just getting a plus anything from him defensively, you are in really, really good shape. And I mean, I said this last week, Nikola Jokic at this point is the world's most talented road grader. He's not getting off the floor. You cannot get him away from his spots. You can try to send everything you want at him, and he meets it with that equal force of passing. If there is one knock on Jokic's game, and what I'm hearing from you is he could be in maybe a little bit better shape and that sort of thing.
Oh, no. Okay, I want to clarify that real quick. I don't care what kind of shape he's in. Like, I just sort of am thinking out loud, like, if he was so focused just on basketball, could he be the greatest ever? He may end up being the greatest ever. You know what I mean? I don't care that he's a little bit bigger. That doesn't bother me one iota. I think he's spectacular as he is. And who knows, maybe some of that, we all have different body types, right? I'm just saying, like, if there was no horses in the side, right?
Sure. Okay.
If it was all just mentally focused, not physically, just sort of mentally, like, would he be dunking on AD every chance he got?
To me, the only knock on Jokic's game of the things that he can change, he's not going to get more athletic. He can get in better shape, but I think he's at a good equilibrium with that now.
Yeah.
The only thing I would change is Jokic still has that tendency, like LeBron James, and this is high backhanded praise, like LeBron James, to be so dialed into making the right basketball play every time that sometimes the right basketball play is the wrong play for your team. Jokic still has that tendency, and you can tell that Malone is in his ear, and I'm sure some of the other veterans are in his ear too, trying to break him of this. There are those times when he's got somebody on a mismatch down at point blank range, and the double team comes, and he is still passing out of the double team to the open guy who, may have a decent shot at knocking down that three, but Jokic has a Max Strus or a Gabe Vincent. I saw this multiple times in Game 5, and you did see it periodically throughout the series. He's got a little on his back, and yes, the help is coming, but Nick, you're so big. Just keep backing him down and go to that hook, and the likelihood of you making that hook shot still is statistically far better than what your shooter out on the wing is going to do, especially in a game where your shooters just aren't hitting shots. Like in Game 5, they were atrocious from downtown. And that's credit to the Miami Heat defense because the Heat weren't shooting well from outside either, and the Nuggets were playing good closeout defense. But they don't have it going. And there is, I think, that room for growth of Jokic to understand that sometimes the best play is not the best basketball play. And yes, you can abuse that, but I don't think he's one of those guys that does. And it's been a LeBron James work in progress through most of his career, too. We can all think of the very famous playoff moments where he's passing up a shot and people are like, oh, he's scared. He's scared to take it. And LeBron comes back and goes, no, he was wide open. That's my guy. That's Dwayne Wade. That's the guy, whoever, Shane Battier. That guy is in a position where it's a high percentage shot. I'm double teamed. That is their shot to take and make. I'm making the right basketball play. You're like, yeah, but you're LeBron James and you are the best player or one of the two best players ever, depending on how you slice it. Like, you got to do it, right? You got to do it.
Well, yeah, like you're not going to hear me complain about good basketball play, right? Like we sit here and
Yeah.
the LeBron versus Kobe, or even Kobe more recently,
Mm-hmm.
but LeBron versus Michael thing over and over again. People just find some reason to punch LeBron in the face for a decision here or a decision there. LeBron's maybe one of, as far as that I've ever seen, maybe the smartest basketball player as far as basketball wise, that I think maybe I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Like, he just sort of sees the court, gets the court better than anyone that I think I've ever seen.
And Jokic is not all that far
Well,
behind.
I was going to
right?
mention that Jokic, you may
Yeah.
have seen that, what was it, game 1 or game 2 of this series, where like he sort of heard the play that Miami was about to run, and he knew exactly what they were about to do, so he called to an adjustment to the team behind him as he was about to shoot free throws. He's a guy that, like you said, he's clearly a dialed into the tape and watching the film, and he's not just sort of, hey, I'm a big guy that shoots all these shots that don't look like they could go in, but they do, and they touch every bit of the rim when they do, kind of thing. So, I love Jokic's game. I love everything about his game. I'm not going to sit here and be mad if he tosses to someone who misses if they're wide open. These other guys are getting paid too, right? Like, it's the point, like, that, Jokic could score 60 every night, I guess, if he wanted to force it, but that wouldn't have been the team that won the NBA title this year. So that's exactly what was different about sort of Jokic's game that made him different in this game, in the series stand so far. I mean, 1,000 triple doubles this postseason, that may be high, but there's a bunch of triple doubles. Like, the dude's amazing. The dude's completely amazing, and this is a great championship for that team. Mike Malone is a very good coach he's got a little bit more credit. He's also taken every opportunity he can to take shots at the media for not talking about Denver throughout the Lakers series and in the NBA Finals. I don't know if you saw what he did on the Pat McAfee show today, but he was talking to Pat McAfee, and they were asking him about him not getting all the attention even during the Lakers series and even in the NBA Finals. And he said, "Oh, that was a good question. Oh, by the way, apropos of nothing, I'm thinking about retiring." He takes every shot he can. And hey, listen, I'm cool with that, because he did it in the middle of the Lakers series and they still swept him, right? Like, this is a guy that I think has punched up to the media. Now he can punch down to the media a little bit and say, listen, you guys don't want to talk about this? That's fine. We're holding the trophy right now. That's kind of all that matters.
And you and I both said this was the year that Denver had to do it. If you were going to get one, this is the year where the doors were open, relatively speaking. Yeah, they had to work really hard to get there, but there's a lot of, superpower potential teams in the Western Conference. The East has some really elite ones. This was a year of parity. Denver finally got healthy. You don't always have that. You're not going to have that guarantee going forward. Michael Porter Jr. has a long injury history dating back to college. Jamal Murray has had quite a few injuries in the NBA. I'm not as worried about Jokic as I would be for most centers, because he doesn't get that far off the ground. I don't think there's as high of an injury propensity, nor is he a guy who's like 7'4", 7'5", where you're worried about like a Rick Smits or a Yao Ming, somebody like that, where their bodies break down artificially soon just because they're so big. But I do think going forward with Denver, like, they're going to go as Jokic goes. Jokic now has earned the right to be there, a Nugget for life, or for as long as he wants to. And I'm not trying to push into the future, but I think even injury-wise, it is going to behoove him to stay in really good shape. You don't want to go like the Shaq route where you start to really deteriorate. You let your body go over as you get older. Like, those injuries will pile up for a 7-footer. But I think he's in a good space right now. And I know the Nuggets are like, oh, this is the first of many. Yeah, absolutely. You should be talking like that.
Sure, yeah, right.
But Jokic is going to keep getting tested over and over again about where he actually stands in the pantheon, because I think each of the next few years here, for maybe the next 3 seasons, are going to get progressively harder for Denver, based on the firepower that is amassed in the Western Conference that just didn't get a chance to really fire all of its guns here. And the East has some really elite teams still.
And I'll say this, and then we can move on to 1 or 2 off-season things real quick, and then announce that we're going to be taking a little bit of a break, because we need to breathe like Jokic needs to breathe. We need to go get to our horses.
Yeah.
But Jokic said in a recent video that's sort of posted online. I can't remember where it's from, but it's one of the NBA shows or something. That the NBA isn't his whole life. It's not his main thing in his life, but it's just something he's really good at.
Mm-hmm.
You wonder that if he continues to play like this, and we keep now that the focus on him is two-time MVP, everybody wanted now all of a sudden to give him the third MVP once they sort of saw him in the postseason for the first time. And then now he's got that championship. Maybe if he starts getting more of that scrutiny of, okay, well, what if he only has a 12.9 rebound night? You know, you start getting like what LeBron deals with every single day. That, you know, maybe he's not someone who cares to play this all that long. You know, maybe he's not someone. It's clear it's not the best tool. He doesn't have to have a Hall of Fame career or play for 20 seasons in the NBA. He doesn't seem like someone that's dedicated to that being sort of his main mission. So it will be sort of interesting to see, as you said, as he gets more tested and more scrutiny comes in. Luckily, he's in a place in Denver that's going to be a little more lenient, but you know, we'll see how that goes. I will see, because that's a very interesting spot that he'll be in now.
That's a great point. And, you know, people can change as they get older, and all of a sudden he may be a guy who's dialed in and is a lifer and plays it out to the very end of what his body will allow. But you're right. I don't know that I can see Jokic doing this until he's 40.
He's just 28.
Right. Is he a guy, though, at 34 or 35, especially if he gets another ring, says I've done it, and I don't want to be, you know, I don't want to get to that stage of my career where I'm coming off the bench and I'm just, you know, on somebody else's team as a ring chaser. Why do I need to do that? I made my money. I'm sure his money's going to go further in Serbia than it does in the US. You know, and I'm done. Like, again, we don't want to play armchair psychologist, but yeah, he's leaving some tea leaves that as of right now, that isn't out of the realm of possibility. And we've seen guys like that before, and more power to them. Like, if you have the gift to do it, you also have the free will to walk away when it's time for you, and it's time for your family and your body and all that stuff too. And as his kids get older, that, you know, he's got one right now, I believe, but if he's got more down the line, like, that becomes a thing for some guys too, where, you know, maybe it's I'm taking a year off and then I'll come back and sit the bench if I really want to, or I'm done in the NBA at 34, 35 because I did it all, but I'll play a lot closer to home in Europe and still scratch the basketball itch and be an all-time mega star over there.
Yes.
And that's cool with me, because the NBA was just a stop in my career, not the end-all be-all, you know.
I mentioned this, and then we can move on. Next year, $46.9 million set to make. The year after that, 50.6. The year after that, 54.4. The year after that, 58.1. And if he opts in for the 27-28 season as a player, he'll get $61.9 million. And then at the age of 33, he'll be an unrestricted free agent at that point. Maybe that is it for him. Maybe he plays, you know, and makes several $100 million in United States money and says, that'll buy me a few horses in Serbia. I could be okay with that. And then, like you said, go be that megastar in Serbia and be a national hero in Serbia. And maybe that's more of his speed. You know, he's got his brothers to be able to take care of all the USA, you know, traversing and partying and stuff like that. So it'll be, I'm very intrigued to see what the Jokic path ends up being. Before we get out of here, I do want to mention that it was reported by the Wojster, Adrian Wojnarowski, for the old ESPN 4-letter network there, that the Washington Wizards are listening very strongly to possible trade options for Bradley Beal. Bradley Beal, you may remember, just signed a $250 million mega deal. He just finished the first year of that. And it looks like Washington may be interested in going away from him, maybe sort of restructuring the franchise that's missed the playoffs in 4 of the last 5 years. Now, he is apparently, I did not know this, the last player and the only player in the NBA that has a no trade clause.
No trade clause, yeah.
Which is interesting that no one else has sort of asked for that. I guess everyone sort of prefers to do these opt-in, opt-out player options as opposed to the no trade clause, so to speak. But Bradley Beal does have that option. So let me ask you, Joel C. Cordes, where does Bradley Beal fit somewhere? And do you think that he's someone worth putting, this kind of money into?
Brad Beal fits on just about any team, which is what makes him really intriguing. The question is going to be at this stage of his career where injuries have been an issue. He is hitting his mid-30s. He's not an MVP caliber player. He's a 3-time All-Star, but he's got the, I think, ideal NBA skill set, modern NBA skill set for a guard. And actually, wow, he's only 29. I was thinking he was like 33 already. So Bradley Beal, not even yet 30. He fits just about anywhere. I've got a list of teams that I think he fits on better, and that there's a couple are going to come calling. The Miami Heat and the Dallas Mavericks are forever star chasing. They will come calling to try to figure this out. They've got fits that would work. I would love to see Brad Beal next to Luka. I think Brad Beal makes a ton of sense in Miami. It's just, what do either of those teams who have moved heaven and earth to get stars already, what do they have ideally, legitimately to give up to a team in Washington that would surely be entering a rebuild? Miami would have to start with they would have to start with getting rid of Tyler Hero. Like, that's the beginning of the conversation. Are they okay with that? No, you should not get rid of Bam Adebayo in any Brad Beal deal. Like, that needs to be off the table. Dallas, I'm not even real sure. Like, I'm not even real sure what they have at this point that is truly enticing. They kind of cleared the decks to get Kyrie Irving, which just makes that all the more dumb that they did that for that particular player.
Well, that's when we talked about at the time, like one of the baffling decisions to go after a Kyrie Irving was the fact that they had to move so much to get the Kyrie Irving and to make all that money work too. And it's just, we thought this had no shot of working long term or even semi short term.
Brad Beal looks fantastic in either of those places, but good luck getting them. I think somebody like New York, big market, somebody like Philadelphia, both are going to make calls about this. They have a better option of young guys to make this happen. And RJ Barrett has to be part of any deal for Brad Beal. It really depends on what Washington sees in somebody like Barrett and whether they want to build around that. Does New York want to potentially shorten their runway just a little bit? But again, Beal's not exactly old.
Here's the thing about, if you're New York, like you're not looking at, you're not trying to build for 6 years down the road or something like this.
And you're not building around Brad Beal. You're adding Brad Beal as the second wheel to a 3-wheel setup. For Philly, it's kind of similar. If James Harden is going to walk, then you hope that, being that James Harden and Daryl Morey are tight, that he can work out a sign and trade and probably a 3-team deal. James Harden isn't going to go to Washington, and Washington doesn't want James Harden, but a 3-team type of deal that can somehow land Bradley Beal in Philadelphia, that would be a big deal. And in fact, Beal probably fits better in Philly next to a Tyrese Maxey, a DeAnthony Melton, Shake Milton, those type of guys, and a Joel Embiid. Probably fits better in Philly than Harden does, even just based off of what Maxey has shown us with the ability to run point guard. Harden did a fantastic job. But Brad Beal is a good facilitator, not a great one, but a good facilitator as a shooting guard. There's a couple of other teams here who should 110% be in this mix and at least making phone calls and trying to make it happen. The Clippers are another one where, like the Heat, like the Mavericks, they've got some pieces. I don't know if they're the right pieces because it's mostly veteran guys, but they're going to be kicking the tires on that. Closer to home for me, Minnesota. Like, this is the moment. Karl-Anthony Towns is a New Jersey guy. He's a New York guy. Get in on a 3-team deal, and even if Brad Beal coming to Minnesota doesn't make a ton of sense, although you could run him and Anthony Edwards as wings and having another veteran guy in that locker room, when you've already shown that you can play fine without Towns, you can do the Anthony Edwards, Rudy Gobert, Jaden McDaniels thing and win some games. But to add a Bradley Beal in that, for a guy that just doesn't make any sense in Minnesota anymore, whether it's a 3-team deal or a 2-team deal, you need to be all in on trying to make something happen there. And we've talked about Towns in Minnesota for a little bit, so I won't belabor that point anymore. But similarly to Minnesota, another team that's got a good foundation They just need some more veteran punching power. The Brooklyn Nets, the team that I just mentioned in the 3-team deal, like this is where town should wind up, is in Brooklyn. And Brooklyn's got enough of the young wings and pieces that Washington might be interested in to move a Brad Beal to Minnesota. But Brad Beal also could go to Brooklyn and really lift up what they've got there, which is a decent collection of guys, but you're going to need a second wheel or a first wheel next to Mikal Bridges. And you can spread out some of that wing power that you have and see where it goes. There's going to be other teams, would Boston be willing to part with a Marcus Smart or a Jaylen Brown to shuffle the deck and do something different?
I keep hearing that they feel like that they want to do something. But it's hard to tell. Like, is it the Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum thing, or is it the coach and the fact that now he's getting brand new assistants? They're actually sort of more his guys. They weren't forced upon him at the beginning of the season. Could that be the situation? That's a very interesting offseason to pay attention to what they're very interested to do, because Jaylen Brown's about to get a lot of money.
Chicago is another team that feels like they got to do something and probably is going to shake things up here a bit during the offseason. Do they have enough young pieces? I don't know, but they've got a few. Charlotte's got some really intriguing young pieces, but here again, Brad Beal, does he want to go from one rebuild with some talent to another rebuild with some talent? I think he would veto that sort of idea, but seeing Brad Beal next to LaMelo Ball, we can dare to dream.
Dare to dream. Yeah.
I don't know that a team like the Lakers, again, unless it's a sign and trade, do they move on from their young guys who are the very reason that they even got into this to try to add another star? And it's a Washington Wizard. You already tried this with Russell Westbrook. Do you really want to roll the dice? I mean, Beal is a much better fit and a more complete player at this point, but I don't know. I wouldn't do that if I were the Lakers. I like the group that they have there. Memphis might feel they need some more firepower.
Like, everyone's sending like draft picks for like the next 12 years that never matter anyway.
Right. So, I mean, there's some teams, there's a handful, maybe like 10 teams in the league where Beal just really doesn't make sense with. But most of the other ones you could talk yourself into. And at least the ones that I named, there's a few that make more sense than others.
I've talked myself into the New York Knicks being interested. Very, very highly interested. I haven't read much about that lately since we sort of seen this.
Just give it time. The New York media will find a way to weasel into that story, just like the Lakers media will weasel their way into it.
I would hate to move on from an RJ Barrett because I really, really like him. But again, you're talking to the same guy that really liked Kevin Knox, right? And that clearly didn't sort of work out. So, but I think RJ Barrett's turned out to be a better player so far on the court than Kevin Knox. But I think there's a real opportunity there for Bradley Beal. The only thing is the injuries do worry me a little bit. I do worry about the money, and it's not my money, but as far as like the guys that you would have to give up to match the contract, right? That it could be sort of, it could be a little prickly there. There may be a decision or two I don't like, but I think the Knicks are ready to compete, like mentality wise, a good core around them wise. That you've seen, you don't need 7 or 8 great players to be able to go deep in the playoffs and to win. You just need 1.5, 2, and if you get 3 really good players, you can put yourself in a really good position. And I think with Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle, I think those are your 2 dudes. And then if you need to move a couple of pieces here or there, let's talk. Let's talk for a Bradley Beal. I think a Bradley Beal is a wonderful position for that. And you know what? I think a Tom Thibodeau would appreciate a Bradley Beal style. I think Tom Thibodeau would not hide him on the bench for whatever reason.
No,
I think he fits. I would think he would fit a Tom Thibodeau offense.
There's a couple other guys who could legitimately be interesting to the Wizards. And Emmanuel Quickly is going to give you a lot of production, and if he finally has the reins to run his own team, is probably going to put up some pretty big numbers. Will it be efficient? Will it be winning? That remains to be seen, but he's shown major strides. Obi Toppin, Quentin Grimes.
I think Obi Toppin is definitely on that list that goes in that case. I think RJ Barrett would probably be a second player that goes on that, but I think those would be the 2 players that you would get.
Yeah.
And then probably some draft capital or something.
I think Washington would ask for RJ Barrett plus 1 of Quickly or Toppin.
Yeah.
Depending on how they feel about an Isaiah Hartenstein, I do think that Mitchell Robinson has proven enough that he might actually be off the table in trade type of deals, within reason, of course.
Okay.
But he's played so well next to Julius Randle and does a lot of things that Randle doesn't, and vice versa, that it seems to be a pretty good pairing with the two of them. So yeah, I mean, New York is a perfectly plausible and possible destination. Brad Beal is a smart guy. He's a loyal guy. He's been around the league for a while now. He's been on some winning teams with John Wall. He's been in some dysfunctional situations with John Wall. He's been in a quasi rebuild now for a couple of years. You have to imagine that as part of this, he and his agent will go to the Wizards and have a short list of like 3 teams that go, let's talk to these 3. Let's see where they're at. This is where I want to go. I have the power to veto the other teams. So start talking to these ones first, and let's see if we can find something. Is a New York on that list? Is a Chicago, does it have to be a big market team for him at this point in his career? Or is it, no, just find a way to get me onto the Miami Heat. Find a way to get me onto one of these situations where they're clearly ring hunting, not to say that like New York isn't, but certain teams have that allure that they've built over time, rightly so, as being championship or bust.
Stop saying it. The Knicks. Yeah, we get it. You're just describing the Knicks. I get it. Okay. 30 seconds or less, and then we'll wrap up. Where do you think Bradley Beal winds up all of this? Washington, does he stay, or does he move somewhere and then pick the spot if he moves?
I do think he gets moved. Where does he wind up? If I have to pick one, I'm going to pick Philly.
Okay.
I'm going to pick Philly because Daryl Morey has shown time and again that he can figure out ways to get this sort of thing done.
I think it should be the Knicks. I like Bradley Beal a lot. I like Jalen Brunson before everyone was
Knicks are real close. Knicks are real close. If I'm voting with my heart, it's a 3-team deal that gets Beal either in Minnesota or elsewhere, and Minnesota gets rid of Towns somewhere. Some way to Brooklyn. Get Towns to Brooklyn. That's a good fit for him.
Karl-Anthony Towns, as he says, that once he retires, people will look back on him and say he changed the game. That's a real thing that he said. So just throwing that out there. I think he'll end up in Miami. I think Miami is a great spot for him. Great coach, great franchise, clearly under Pat Riley. So that's where I think he'll end up. I want him in New York. And as a favor to you, we'll go Minnesota number 2.
Okay, because I know you'll never vote for Philly and you'll never consciously vote for Miami either. And I respect that. We've all got our teams that we just do not like. So
no, that's right. Boston, the one that I hate the most. Philly 2, the Miami. Interesting how they happen to be in the same, division. Whatever.
Well, and the Knicks have some history with each of those 3 teams. So
I should say, yeah. I guess Miami's not in the same division anymore. They sort of changed that up to be the Southeast, but whatevs, bro. That's how we're going to do it. So we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, it'll be in a couple of weeks. We'll get ready for free agency time.
We'll be post NBA draft.
Next week's the NBA draft. I don't know if Victor Wembanyama is one of these guys you've heard of, but he looks like he's a strong candidate to go to San Antonio. Maybe San Antonio
Detroit at number 5, baby.
But that looks like it's going to be a fairly boring and mundane draft going into it. The only thing interesting out of it is that Victor Wembanyama apparently is not going to play in the summer league, which, I mean, Kobe played in the summer league, LeBron played in the summer league. I mean, why can't Victor Wembanyama? Everybody plays in the summer league, right? But anyway,
that's a bummer because I was even thinking about going to Vegas even before Wemby, but yeah, I was thinking about going to summer league, and I was like, oh, he's going to be there.
He could change his mind, but that's the last that I had heard of yesterday. So, but we'll come back after the draft. We'll have any notes that happen from it, and we'll get you set for the free agency period. They start contacting people right as we're coming on the air next week. Start doing a little bit of legal tampering. We like to call it. Little like reaching out. Nobody can officially say nothing.
If we ever rebrand the show, that's going to be the new title of the show. It'll be legal tampering. So it's too good not to use something for that.
Legal tampering. Let's see if I can find that as a podcast. In the meantime, Joe, can you say goodbye to the good people?
Yeah, the Don Nelson episode 150 is in the books. Congrats to us, I guess, but congrats and big thanks to you as the listeners for being with us along the way. And we really appreciate you. Again, if you like what you've heard, like, share, subscribe, do all that stuff on YouTube for the video version. Tell your friends about the show. Audio only, Spreaker, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcast. And yeah, we'll take a break and see you in a couple weeks.